Good morning, brothers and sisters. I want to share with you an experience I had yesterday. One of the great joys of being a member of the clergy is that I get an opportunity to walk beside folks at some of the momentous times in their lives. Some of them are wonderful: baptisms, weddings. Others are more challenged: hospitals, funerals. But regardless, it's a privilege to be able to witness to God's presence in people's lives in all the different ways. But yesterday was a very happy experience because I got to officiate the wedding of two wonderful folks who are a little bit later in their journey. In fact, they were engaged to be married 60 years ago. Yeah, you heard me right. And for a variety of reasons, they did not marry. They both went on and had lives, married other folks, and later, in fact, recently, reconnected and found that old flame from 60 years ago was still burning. And it was a joy to be able to officiate a COVID wedding, a very socially distanced, masked, safe, small, in-home wedding. But as I was looking at the liturgy, it put me in mind of our situation right now. I want to share with you a passage from Paul's letter to the Corinthians, which was read at the wedding yesterday. Indeed, it might have been read at your wedding as well. It's a very popular one. It was read at my wedding. Paul says, "Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends." Now that gets, as I said, read a lot at weddings, and it sounds like it's incredibly appropriate for weddings because it sounds like it's talking about the love for two people. Yet, that's not really what Paul was talking about when he wrote that passage. Certainly it does apply, and it is a wonderful passage at weddings, but what Paul is actually talking about is not the love for two people, rather the love for a community. He's writing to the church in Corinth who has had some challenges and isn't getting along all that well anymore. And so what Paul's writing about is the love that we have for one another when he talks about patience and kindness and bearing with one another and not being resentful and not letting wrongdoings become part of it, but instead embracing love because love endures. That's what he's talking about, is our love for one another through the church and the way that we care for each other. It sounded to me like a very poignant message, especially as we're in the Christmas season, and the strangest Christmas season any of us have ever had. COVID continues to challenge us in new ways, and we find ourselves, well, a little raw, a little rough around the edges, little, unfortunately, more willing to engage in some of the petty things because we are so irritated in other ways in our life. So I thought this was a good reminder that we are called to love one another, to bear with one another, to be kind to one another. I think a good way to sum this up is actually in the nuptial prayer. I'm going to read this to you as well, and you tell me if you think that this applies to something beyond just a marriage. Eternal God, creator and preserver of all life, author of salvation and giver of grace, look with favor upon the world you have made. for which your Son gave his life, and especially upon this man and woman whom you have made one flesh in holy matrimony. Give them grace when they hurt each other, to recognize and acknowledge their fault, and to seek each other's forgiveness and yours. Make their life together a sign of Christ's love to us in this sinful and broken world, that unity may overcome estrangement, forgiveness heal guilt, and joy conquer despair. Boy, that sounds to me like a prescription that the world needs right now, doesn't it? Grace to acknowledge when we hurt one another, to recognize and acknowledge our faults, to seek forgiveness from one another and from God. To know that Christ's love is here, even in the midst of this sinful and broken world. To focus on unity rather than estrangement, forgiveness that might heal guilt, and know that joy will indeed conquer despair. Just an amazing and beautiful prayer. And that was my privilege yesterday, was to pray this prayer with this couple. And my prayer going forward is that we pray it together, that it may be here for all of us and give us a bit of a roadmap through the end of 20 and into 21. God love you. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.